Hello guys, welcome back. So in this lecture, let's quickly implement a helper function where we have to pick a pivot point and then we have to store that in its correct position. That means we have to push all the elements which are smaller than the pivot element at the left side and then all the elements which are greater than that pivot element at the right side. Okay. So let's start implementing it. And by the way, like if you haven't watched the previous video, make sure to watch it first because there I've explained the theory, like how we actually work in the quicksort, right? So I'll give you a little hint like what we are going to implement in this lecture. Okay. So let's say we have an array, right? We are not going to implement any splitting function or at all. We are going to implement a helper function. What it will basically do, it will pick the pivot element, right? Or we can say we'll pick the first element, for example. Okay, then what we will do, we will find all the numbers which are smaller than that number. Okay, and then we move them on one side and then all the numbers which are larger than that pivot number on the right side. Okay, how we are going to do that, let's quickly see that. Okay, so for that, let me give you an explanation a little quick. And by the way, this is the swap index code which I'm going to use because we need this code in order to swap the indexes, right? So in case if you're not aware of this, just write it down. It's just a simple swapping logic, right? So 5, let's say 7, or let's say 7. Okay. 7 2 1 9 8 4 6. Now this one is fine, right? So here I'll try to explain how it works, right? What we are going to implement. Okay. So we have 7. 7 is greater than our number 5. Okay. So since 5 is a pivot, now we are looping through the array from the 7 and 7 onwards, right? So we will see 7 and then 2. 2 is smaller than this element, this, which is basically greater than the pivot element. So what we will do in this second iteration, or in this iteration itself, we will swap these elements. Okay, 7 and 2, right? Now what we will do, we will simply check for the other elements. 1 is also smaller than pivot number 5 and it is also smaller than the first largest number in the array. So what we will do, we will again swap 1 with 7. Okay, 1 with 7, right? Now we will check 9 is greater than 5, 8 is greater than 5, 4 is smaller than 5. So here what we will do, 4 we are going to swap with the 7, right? Here we will pass 4 and here we will pass 7, right? Now 6 is greater than 5. So now we have some elements which are smaller than 5 and we have some elements which are greater than 5, right? So what we are going to simply do, we are simply going to swap the smaller number index, or we can pick the larger number index. No, we just have to pick the small number index and then we will swap it with the pivot number which we have selected, and that is all we have to do in this lecture, right? So we are simply going to add 4 here and then we have to add 5 here. So if you see, all the numbers which are smaller than 5 are on the left side, all the numbers which are greater than 5 are on the right side now. Okay, so let's quickly implement this. Okay, I hope you guys understood what we are going to work on. Okay, and if not, then make sure to watch the previous video because there I've explained all the things like how it works. Okay, this portion also I've explained. So we are going to particularly work on this thing. Okay, so this is a swapping logic. If you want, you can write it down. So I'll start working with the helper function, right? So function, let's say helper, let's make it helper pivot. Let's make it pivot as well. So here I'm going to pass the array and then the start index and then the end index. Okay, so start index by default I'll use 0 and end index by default I'll use length plus 1. Okay. So now here what we have to do, we have to first select a pivot number. So for the sake of easiness, like we will use the first number as a pivot number. Okay. So that you guys can understand easily, right? So let's pick the pivot. So this one is simple array at position start, right? So this is going to be our pivot because start index, it should be start index, right? Like this. Okay. And now we have to pick an index which we are going to swap throughout the iterations, right? So here if you see, we have found 7 and 2, right? So what we had to do, we had to swap them, right? So for that we have to store some the index of 7 somewhere, right? Then only we can swap that with the current iteration index, right? So for that, let's quickly create a variable. Let's say swapping id x equals to, let's pick start index for now. Okay. Now what we have to do, we simply have to return the swapping index at the end. Okay. And let's quickly log the array at the end as well. Okay, because here only we are going to see how whether it is actually working or not, right? So now let's write the logic part here. So the logic part is also not that much tricky. You just have to pay attention to it, right? So we simply have to run a for loop. So let I equals to, we are going to start from the second index onwards, right? Because first index we are picking as a pivot point, so that does not make any sense to pick the first element as well, right? So I is more than array dot length and then I plus plus. Okay, so now here what we have to do, okay, we simply have to check if the pivot which is array at position start, let's say this number, if this number, oh sorry, if pivot is greater than array at position I, right? If pivot is greater than array at position I, so basically this number or any number, okay, let's say this number or this number, then what we have to do, we simply have to swap the indexes. Okay, so let's see what we can do. So for that we will use swap old. Okay, this is a swapping function which we have to use, and then we have to basically swap, use the swap index plus plus. Okay, so we have to increment the swap index by 1, because here if you see, let's say this is a number which is greater than what to say, the pivot number. Okay, but this number is also greater than the small number which we found right after this one. So what we have to do, we have to swap it, and then the swapping index for this one we have to increment by 1, right? Because right now this number is at third position. So earlier the index for this was 0 1 1, right? Now the index for this after swapping is 0 1 2 2, right? So that is why we have to increment the swapping index also whenever we are swapping something. Okay, that you have to keep in mind, right? So let's pass array, and then we have to pass array at swapping index, or we have to pass the swapping index directly, right? Swapping index, and then we have to pass I, right? Because this swapping index element only, basically this element we are going to swap with this one, right? So let's say if the swapping index is this, and then the what to say, the element which we found which is smaller than the swapping index is this, so we are going to swap them, and then we are going to simply increment the index of swapping element, right? Swapping index variable, right? So this was the first part. Now all there is left is to do one more swap whenever we find like we reach the final step, right? So let's say we have reached this step. So here we have all the elements which are smaller than 5 and all the elements which are greater than 5. So what we have to do, we simply have to swap this element with this element, right? And that is what we have done here. If you see, 4 is now at the first index, 5 is at the middle, right? So we are basically going to swap this index with this one. Okay, so for that what we have to do, we simply have to call this swap index function once more. Okay, so here we will pass start and then swapping index, because start index only we are going to swap with the swapping index. Okay, and now we are done. Okay, yeah, so now let's quickly see whether it is working fine or not. I think I might have done some mistake, but let's see. Okay, so here what we are going to do, and end of the day we are going to return the index, and there is a reason why I am returning the index. Okay, so let's say our pivot is 5, right? So 5 will go here at the final step, right? So I am going to return the index at which the 5 is placed now. Okay, so let's say 5 is here, 0 1 2 3, so it should return 3. Okay, and then I'm logging this whole array to see whether we are getting the exact data or not, right? So let's use this one and then let's pass it. Okay, let's console log it to see whether it is working fine. Okay, so start is not defined start because it is start index, and I don't know why I'm keep on writing start every time. I think you guys might have spotted it already. Okay, so now if you see, let me quickly zoom it. Okay, so now if you see, it is working the way we want. 5 is at position 3, right? And we are getting the index 3. Okay, so this is all about like helper function. Okay, so where what we are basically doing, we are picking a pivot point, we are moving all the numbers which are smaller than the pivot point in the left side and all the numbers which are larger than the pivot point on the right side. All there is left is to break down an array into half, right? So that we are going to implement in the next lecture, so don't worry about it. Okay, so let's quickly add few console logs to see which element is getting swapped and when. Okay, so here let's say we have array, we don't need to swap it, swapping index and I. Okay, so if pivot is greater than array at position I, so first let's see which element is greater than what. Okay, so let me add a log here. This VS Code is sometimes so annoying, guys. Okay, so here I have to add pivot and then here I have to add current element, curr. Okay, like so, right? So now we will be seeing like which element we are swapping and with what. Okay, so pivot is this and then the current element which we found is this. Okay, and swapping index also, let's see. For swapping index we have to, yeah, before before and after we will see. Before swap, let's write it down here. Okay, so before incrementing swap and then after this we will see. Let me log this after incrementing swap. Okay, so now I think you guys can see it clearly, I hope so. Let me quickly stretch it a little bit. Okay, so now here we have pivot 5 2 which is greater than is smaller than 5, so we are going to do a swap. Swapping index we have incremented by 1. Okay, before incrementing it was 0, swapping index was 0 because we have took swapping index as the start index, and start index by default was 0, right? Okay, Just a minute, because I think it will be hard to for you guys also to see, right? Okay, so now I think this much is fine. This much will be fine, right? Okay, so as you can see, swapping index at the start was 0, right? So what we have done, whenever we are swapping any element, we found 2. Okay, so 2 is obviously smaller than the pivot point, so we are going to do some swapping. Okay, so what we have done, we have incremented the swapping index by 1. So array at position 1, we have 2, so that means we are pointing to this number now. Okay, not this one, this number now. Okay, so swapping index is now this one. So with this we are going to swap the current element. Array at position I is this, right? Okay, so this one was array at position I, which is smaller than 5, and swapping index we have incremented from 0 to 7, 0 to 1, right? So what it will do, it will simply swap this one with this, and that is what we are doing here. Okay, now the second step, here we found one current element. Okay, here we found 1. So let's see where is 1. 1 is this one. Okay, so array at position I, so I will be 0 1 2 3, I will be 3. Swapping index we have to increment by 1. Okay, since 7 and 2 we have moved already, so the current swapping index will be 1, I guess. Okay, swapping index will be 1, right? So we have to increment it, we have to point it here, because right now the array will be like this, right? So right now the array will be like this, where 2 will be the first element and then 7 will be the second element, right? So we have to increment the swapping index like this to by 1 2.7, right? Because 7 is the one which we are going to swap with 1, right? So that is why we have incremented this index for swapping as 2. So array at position 2, 0 1 2, 0 1 2. So array at position 2 we are going to get 7 here. I think you guys can see now. Array at position 2 you are going to get 7, and 7 is the one which you are going to swap with array at position I, which is 1. Okay, and the same step we are keep on repeating for the rest of the elements. Okay, whichever element we find is smaller than the pivot number, we are simply going to swap it with the swapping index, and at the end here swapping index will be somewhere here, right? Swapping index will be somewhere here. Okay, so this one, so I think we can see here itself. So at the end we have swapping index as 4, current element as 4. Okay, so it have reached this part. Okay, so the swapping index for this one before was 2, and then after incrementing it was 3. So 0 1 2 3. So array at position 3 is 4, right? So this element we are going to simply swap with this element, which is our pivot number, right? So that is what we have done here, and that is what we have done at the last step. We are simply swapping the pivot number with the swapping index number. Okay, that means short and simple, in the swapping index number we are going to get the largest number or last small number which is smaller than, or we can say largest number which is smaller than the pivot point. Okay, so here as you can see, uh, here if you see, here we have the last number which is smaller than the pivot number. Okay, so we are going to swap it with this one. So here this way we will have all the small numbers on the left side and all these larger numbers on the right side. Okay, so it might be confusing for you guys in the one go. Okay, you guys do one thing, you guys write down the code, go through it, and then re-watch the lecture if you want. Okay, it's not that much complicated, but still if you are unable to make it in one go, then you can obviously watch it multiple times. That's totally fine, that's totally normal, right? Don't stress out. Okay, so yeah, this is it for the helper pivot function in this video. I'll attach this snippet in the description, make sure to get it from there. And then in the next lecture, let's quickly finish the merge sort or quick sort implementation. Okay, so yeah, this is it for today. See you in the next one.